Hello, everyone. Welcome back again to the Markout Podcast. It has been a while since I was last in here, but we're trying something new. As you can see, I have a new guest host with me this week, and we're going to try to flow with the guest host coming forward. But shout out to my producer, Jay, for the new intro. That was awesome. And today we got SB West Coast co-leader, co-founder, co-runner, something. Either of those.
That all works, man. Yeah.
Bushido Zed on today.
Thank you. No, thank you, man. I was as soon as you hit me up about this, man, or actually you posted about it, I was like, yo, get me on for real. I would love to be number one. Um, like I said, yeah, I've kind of like a deep, strong connection with wrestling as a child, many years of being entertained with storylines and feats of athleticism, uh, which is really what these guys are. They're athletes and they're performers, and they do a really good job of it. So yeah, I'm excited to be here on the show. Thank you, Stash. Thank you, Jay. Very honored.
It's funny because a lot of fighters have a very polarizing opinion on wrestling. It's either like you love it or you hate it. But there's a lot in our group specifically that do have these fond memories of it and understand it. And that's what it comes down to. If you understand it, then you usually have an appreciation to it. If you don't understand it at all, then there might be some resentment towards it. But I noticed talking to you first, like your sense of humor and the gifts you would put sometime, like, oh, this guy has some wrestling in him. He likes the old school stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know what you mean, man. And that stigma has always been around about wrestling. It is either love or hate. Like you have to be all the way in, or you have to be for some reason like all the way against it, is what it seems. And it sucks that it's like that because not everything is like that. Not every TV show is like has a whole crowd that loves it and a whole crowd that hates it. So it's really in a unique spot. But I will say that, I mean, any way you look at it, any attention is good, right? Whether it's positive or negative, and that's really something that I think wrestling, you can learn from wrestling is there's different energies that you can harness. You know what I'm saying? There's a dark energy, if you will, and like a light energy and stuff in between too. So you can be a mix and you can be whatever you want to be, basically. And that was ultimately, like, looking back, that was what it was for me. It was kind of like inspiring. It was kind of like, you can be who you want to be. And that's kind of like why I'm a gamer as well, is like I just love taking on roles that are different and trying to excel in them. And so, like, that's kind of how wrestling was in my head.
Yeah, so let's start it off. I think I'm gonna ask this question to most people since I'm gonna have a rotating guest window for the foreseeable future. What is it that was your first memory of wrestling? How did you get into it, and what was a big thing that stood out to you?
I I actually think my very first memory was from a Super Nintendo game, I believe. So I didn't have access to like a whole lot of channels as a really young kid, but I somehow had a Super Nintendo. So of course got a hold of WWF, right? Played it a bunch, played it with my friends, had tons of fun, and I honestly, like, I didn't realize for a long time that these characters on this video game were characters on a show, in a real life show. And so, like, I didn't make that connection for a while. I don't know how long it was. But then eventually I came across some footage, and then it was over from there, man. And it was really, for me, early on, it was WCW. And
Hmm.
I know we talked a little bit about this in text, but man, like, just the difference in the style of wrestling, or during that time period, and specifically WCW had a lot of high flyers, very technical, fast moving, that type of wrestling versus where WWF at that time was like there was a lot of like one big clothesline and one
Yeah.
big this and one big that, and that was the style. And there's really like was two different styles at that time, and for me it was all about that hot, fast paced, high flying, technical style, and that was WCW. So yeah.
Yeah, back in the mid '90s, WWE, everybody was on TRT, Jack to the Gills, and it was
Act, dude, huge.
yeah,
Yeah.
super big, and it was a lot like the matches were not that great unless you got to like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. But down the card, it was really bad. You had like garbage truck drivers. You had have you ever seen Mantar?
I have not seen Mantar. No.
Maybe Jay could search up Mantar the wrestler and pull it up, but it was basically a dude with a big bull head, and he's like 300 pounds. He kind of looks like like he's never had an athletic
Yeah.
virtue in his
Yeah.
life, but he's a big ass dude, and it'd be this realistic bull helmet, and then he would take it off, and he would just like his face would be painted like brown over his face. It was
Oh,
weird.
wow. Whoa. Yeah, no, and like it's funny that I don't know that wrestler specifically, but
Yeah,
that's an archetype and a build that I remember for sure.
yeah,
That
right.
that was around during that time, and it was really about big, tall guys. They could be muscular, but they didn't have to be. They could be pretty just like whatever looking, but if you're
Yeah, as
tall,
long as you were 6'3" and
yeah,
like
dude,
had a 200-pound plus frame, you were there. Yeah,
yep. Can you go off the ropes? Good. Can you throw a clothesline? Good. All right, we're in. That was
yeah,
it.
and they would have these storylines like the dumpster guy would be on his garbage route, and he'd be like, "I'm taking out the trash in the WWF."
Uh,
See, that's look at how
oh my god.
he's 400 pounds, dude. It looks like those things you take off of like a
Wow.
Cracker Barrel wall.
Yeah, no, for real. For real. 400 pounds. And dude, there was a bunch of guys like that, man. Like Yokozuna, Viscera,
Yeah,
just really huge guys that were actually like surprisingly strong
yeah.
too. But man, just massive. Like it didn't even make sense. You see them on the screen, you're like, I mean, I know they're a real human, but it seems like an episode of like something, and
Yeah,
that's what it was always like that in my head was like, wrestling is like, I know it's not real, but I
mhm.
know those thumps are real and they're falling on the mat for real. And like, sometimes they get injured and sometimes that blood's real. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, see, look at my memory. I was right. He had the things around his eyes. That's how he
oh
would look.
yeah,
It's crazy.
that's wild.
It was like it didn't last for more than like a month, I believe. And it was just like there was full guys full like that.
Yeah.
And they would think, oh, he's big, he can do something. His finisher was he would stand in the corner and he would just like rev himself up and then just do a big like boom like that. It was fucking
No,
horrible. That's all he would do.
hit him now.
Yeah, pin him now.
No, that's brutal, man. And so, yeah, like, obviously it still had a huge fan base, and like that wasn't the only era for them, and like they went through a lot of transitions too. But at that time, like as a kid, I just loved, we were talking about Billy Kidman, Rey
Yeah,
Mysterio.
let's transition to that. So like we were saying on WWF, that was what's going on, but on WCW, they implemented this new division called the cruiserweights, and let's talk about that. Talk about some of your favorite ones. You're gonna talk about Billy Kidman. Talk about that.
Yeah, man. And then okay, yeah. So we were talking about Super Nintendo, right? So then later on, oops, sorry.
It's all right.
Murph, come. All right, she's good. I later on I picked up a PS1 game It was like WCW Thunder or maybe Nitro. I think I probably had both. But it had Billy Kidman on there, and I knew who he was, but I wasn't familiar with his moves and stuff. So it was actually on the video game that I got familiar with at the time. His finisher was the 7-year itch, which it's still a shooting star, just like different name, right?
Okay.
That, and then like all of his other named moves, and so like I really got to know him kind of through the video game again, and then so after that, I was a huge Billy Kidman fan. Anytime he was on, I would watch him. I'd watch YouTube videos or try to download videos of him, because it's just a real technical style. Like him and Rey Mysterio would go at it. I remember him and Juventud. Geez, I don't even know. He would go against bigger guys too. He would go against guys like
Well, there was in the end of his career, WCW, he actually had a pretty famous feud with Hulk Hogan, and it was pretty cool. He got a couple wins on Hogan, and that was cool to see.
Back in the day, they kind of really did stick to their weight classes, So if you were if you were cruiserweight, you fought a ton of cruiserweights. If you were heavyweight, that's what you fought, And so like, it's cool to see wrestlers through the years kind of transition and the times transition as well. And for him to get some screen time, like with someone like Hogan, that's cool, man. That's really cool. They're both legends in my book, So like, why not? Why not do that type of stuff?
So you mentioned at the beginning that his finisher was called the 7-year itch on that game. Do you know why it was called the 7-year itch?
Yeah, he was in the Raven flock,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And so I guess that's all I'm not sure
So
if
his original character is he was an addict. Like he was supposed to be like a drug addict or a meth addict or something like that.
Orange shirts and stuff, and like
Yeah, and he would scratch himself and
yes,
stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah. And it was crazy how like these guys would have these weird gimmicks, but they would grow out of it, and nobody even remembers that when you talk about Billy Kidman.
Yeah. Let's see. What's another one that's a good example? Like X-Pac was like 1-2-3 Kid.
Yeah. He was
that's
just
one people really remember.
exactly.
Diesel, aka Kevin Nash. Yeah,
there's a couple. When wrestlers first come out, they're trying to find themselves. Rocky Maivia is a good example of that too.
Yeah.
But it's like they put these weird over the top things on people, and then they just realize, oh, this guy could just be a wrestler. No special strings attached.
For real. And it's hard though, when you're trying to break into the scene. I imagine like if I'm trying to impress or get some type of reaction, I'm gonna probably go over the top at first. That's just like, I don't know, in my brain I'm trying to like wow, you know what I'm saying? So it kind of makes sense in my head.
Well, it's like sometimes that works, like in the opposite direction. Goldust did that, and he was well known. It's like his most well-known character. He still wrestles to this day.
Yeah.
But he'll probably be known as Goldust.
Right? Yeah, and oh man, and for me, that's a name that really I have some memories with because Booker T is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. So like, there was a long time where Booker T and Goldust they were kind of like a tag team, but it was kind of troll, but then they would do well. But then it was really about the story and the cutscenes because it was just so funny and so hilarious. And I can't believe some of those things were said on TV, honestly.
2002 was the wildest year for WWE. Like that was right out of the Attitude Era, and they were like, "Oh shit, we're losing viewers. Let's just go all in, do everything."
Like it's almost porn, but not porn.
Yeah.
It was wild, dude. It was wild for sure. But wildly entertaining, And so that's the end goal is like, are people being entertained? And I know I was during that time. So
I was too young to watch that when it started getting that bad. Like we always knew the Attitude Era was gonna get crazy, but that was really crazy because you had like hot lesbian action, and you
oh,
had like a
dude,
lot of stuff. Bra and panties matches every single week.
every week. Yeah, it was almost like, you know, I you had to like look over your shoulder and be like, I don't know, my parents watching right now. Like, geez,
Every girl who would challenge for the woman's title would be like, "If I win, I'm taking my top off live in the ring." Every single of the bitches would never win, but
oh my, yeah, yeah. It'd be like so close, the whole crowd would be like, yeah. They're
yeah.
like,
They
like,
would tease it, yeah, and then
yeah,
they would just end
yeah,
up getting beat. And then the champion was usually like some like conservative, like
yeah,
no skin at all
yep,
female, and she would just leave.
yep.
Funny.
There was that censorship group. I forgot what their
Oh
name.
yeah, right
Uh,
to censor.
yes, yeah, and they went through some members. That was funny, man. That was funny to see who went through there.
Yeah, you. That's when the WWE took every person that was offensive and put them in that group. So you had Godfather, Val Venus,
Venus. Yeah, I was gonna say Val Venus was in there. Yeah,
but
with
what
that
was his name?
sleeves, right? He had his.
Yeah, he had his sleeves cut off.
Yep.
Yeah. Steven Richards was in there. He was the
Oh,
leader.
dude, I forgot it, but he was like the leader, right?
Yeah, he was the leader. That was his biggest push. He was a big deal at that time.
Oh, for sure. I remember him. I remember him.
I think they had Ball Buchanan, which that's an obscure one, but that he was like the
Oh,
bald guy in that group.
I remember him as well.
Yeah. And
I,
then you topped it off with Ivory. I think that's right to censored right there.
yeah, yeah. No, and they would just come and ruin the day, man.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, it was good. It was a really good push, I think. And it was something that was like really well played, in my opinion, looking back.
That could have been a better group if they gave it more time because it was like it would got them really pissed because you would have like a mud bath fight and
Yeah,
then they would come out
yeah,
there with the burlap
yeah.
sacks and cover
And
the
just
girls.
like, nope, nope.
Yeah,
Oh, dude, yeah, people would be wildly angry, and that's a reaction that you want. If that's the goal of your group, then you're doing it right, and they were doing it right, dude. Because I remember every week they'd be coming on ruining something.
yeah, that's funny because like so I watched a lot of that stuff back because obviously I was like 5, but I do remember like small memories of watching that.
Yeah,
But it's interesting that you remember that every week because for me that was like a blimp. Like, oh, I don't think they lasted that long. They
oh,
probably
no,
lasted a
around
good year.
forever. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're around forever, man, and they mess with like all kinds of groups. Like the APA and like
Oh
you
yeah.
know, of course they were always like smoking and drinking and gambling and stuff like that, and they messed with pretty much every group that you could think of. So
Yeah, the APA. Yeah, those 2000 groups were so funny because I remember they would always have an arena set for them with their little gambling table and everything.
yeah, yeah,
And they
yeah,
were like a group for hire, like a guns for hire.
yeah,
So to talk to them, you would have to go through their door, and it's not a room; it's just like a door, and then behind it's a table and shit. And they're like, "Use the damn door."
yeah. Yes, I remember that. Yeah, and they were like enforcers, dude. And so like if you came with them, you had to like offer some type of deal or like what's in it for them,
Yeah,
because they're chilling, they're smoking,
yeah,
they're
exactly.
drinking. So like they're fine not helping you. It was kind of a cool like thing that they had, and I definitely enjoyed that too.
It's like they would, and that was cool because they weren't good or bad. They would help whoever. They would
Yeah,
help good guys and bad guys just
it
as
was.
long as you had the money.
Yes, it was a wild card. You didn't know which side. They could have helped someone last week, and they can help the enemy the next week. You have no idea. So that was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
that you don't see that a lot, like a neutral, and that gave them good reason. They're like, we just care about the money. We don't really give a shit about anything else.
Yep, yep, yeah. They really didn't have to be involved with a whole lot of storylines. I know they were, throughout the course of it, of course. But really, it was just if they were involved, it was their story. It was the table, it was the door, it was you came to them, and then
Yeah.
if they accepted, then yeah, you'd see them in the ring too. But
See,
yeah,
it's funny how in WWE you remember the storylines more and the characters, but in WCW, like I can't really think of storylines like that off the top of my head.
yeah, and so I will definitely agree with you on that. And it for me probably. I'm guessing, when I was watching WCW, I was like 5, 6, 7, 8. And like I played with a lot of action figures. I love martial arts, I love
Yeah.
Bruce Lee. And so like the high flyers and the technical fast wrestling is what really entertained me in that moment. But as I grew up, I like watched a lot of anime and a lot of movies and stuff like that. And so I think I was still attracted to wrestling, but like you said, the story was more what captivated me in that moment, and that was WWE at the time. So
Yeah. Like in WCW, you had NWO was the big deal. Like they
yeah,
were 90% of the show pretty much.
oh for sure, yep, yep,
They
and
would come on and they would have their storyline, and the cruiserweights would just basically fight each other. There was no really. Sometimes, like if you had Chris Jericho or maybe like Rey Mysterio, they would throw in a storyline, but it was just pretty much this is their division, this is their time, and then
yeah,
would have
yeah,
the
it
NWO
was
on.
really separate for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
man, Jericho, yeah, and his. Can we talk about his finisher for a second? How it's changed? It's changed, and the way I remember it as a kid, it was the lion tamer, right? And so it
Yeah.
was much higher. It was like the neck was bent, and he was sitting on the head, and then
Yeah.
up. Why is it a Boston crab now? It's
I
like,
think for the reason that a lot of kids were trying to emulate it, and
oh, dangerous.
anything with the neck and
Yeah,
stuff. When he went to WWE, they're like, let's not do that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that's a guess. I haven't actually. I don't know the exact reason, but I would think that's a guess as to why. Because the Lion Tamer was cool. It was probably he's gone through a lot of finishers over the years, but
He
that's
had
probably his
a
best
lot
one.
of unique ones, dude, and a lot of ones that are cool.
Yeah.
Honestly, um, he's had some really cool ones. But I think something else that may have contributed to that is that when you move over to he like gained weight. He was not so small anymore, and so he was probably wrestling bigger guys, and bigger guys can't really be held in that position, So
Oh.
you got to modify it. In my mind, I'm like, but he did wrestle, he feuded with like Benoit, and so like I don't know. When you look back at both of those guys in WCW, they are physically smaller. Like,
Yeah.
whether they're on steroids or not at that time, they were
Mhm.
still smaller than when they were wrestling in characters in the WWE. So I don't know. That kind of goes through my head too. Is like, is a move anatomically, physically possible, or is it only possible when you're wrestling as a cruiserweight, smaller guys, and you're a
Well,
small, you know?
yeah, I mean that's why it's good to have a finisher that works on everybody. It's the
Yeah.
same. I never thought about the lion tamer not working on certain people, but I guess that is right because you couldn't do that to like the Big Show or
The
something.
Big Show, yeah, it's like you just got to lift his legs up because he can't bend any more than that, So like,
Yeah, yeah, I think a lot of guys from like that were going to WWE in the '90s had to worry about the Land of Giants thing because in WCW, they just put them with guys their size if they were in the
right?
cruiserweight. But then you come to WWE and everybody's like 6'3" at least, 280
Yeah,
pounds.
it was
So
mixed, man. It was mixed, and I remember like the Intercontinental Championship was like the step down, right? It was like the one down, but it wasn't really like a weight down. It was like a rank down almost title.
yeah,
So like you had guys like Test who rest in peace, I believe he passed away.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I used to love watching that guy. He was so tall, and his big boot would just flying out of nowhere, and you would hear the smack, right? And this guy he's built in as like what 260, 280 probably. I
yeah.
don't
But he
know
was
if he was
huge.
he was huge. And
He was at least
and he
300.
wasn't fighting for like the big titles, he wasn't. And it was because his character wasn't big enough, and that's really was the difference. Was like WCW found a way to implement a style of wrestling and storytelling that guys could still be in their weight class, whereas
Yeah,
WWE, like you said, it was mixed. It was so mixed, and so like if you were a smaller guy, 6 foot something, 6'1", 6'2", you're still gonna be wrestling dudes that are like twice, 3 times your size. It's just how it is.
yeah. And think about that. 6 foot is freaking tall,
That's tall. That's
but
tall.
out there, it's nothing.
It's nothing, dude. It's
Yeah,
wild, and it's kind of the same with like football and sports in general. Like these guys are just freak athletes. Like I mean, guys like Brock Lesnar just born to be killer athletic human beings. And like some people are just born with it, and some people got to work for it. But if you're going to compete at the highest level, you have to expect to take on monsters. It doesn't matter what sport you're in, basically.
yeah.
Whether wrestling or this or that. It's just it's just how it is. The bigger, the better.
Yeah, and that's why you have to go through and think like, okay, how can I feasibly, if it's me wrestling, how am I going to hurt like a big guy?
Yep.
How am I going to hurt the Undertaker? What would I
Yep.
have to do?
You
And I
have
have
to
to
be
think
unique.
about that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah,
You have to use your skill set and the moves you already have to work an area like a leg or his back or something. You know what I'm saying? To chop him down. But yeah.
and that's why Chris Benoit was one of the best at doing that, in my opinion, because every time he would fight someone, he would literally chop them down. I remember watching him versus A Train, and I would be like, damn, he makes this guy look so small. And A
For
Train's like
real.
320 pounds, and he would just be chopping them with everything, and then
Oh,
like
yeah.
working the cross space, everything.
Literal chops, man. Literal chops from Chris Benoit were absolutely brutal. Him and Jericho had probably my favorite chops. I mean, maybe the Big Show with his big overhand one.
Yeah,
That one's brutal too, and like you could see the hand imprint of. It doesn't matter who it is; they're getting that imprint on there. And those chops are real, man. Like I don't know if I'm sure you've taken some chops, dude. Like they hurt and they sting, dude, and it leaves a mark. Like if you're not used to them, you know what I'm saying. If your areas aren't tenderized to it,
yeah,
it's gonna bruise and it's gonna not be pretty for a while. Like,
yeah. I haven't taken any, but I've seen like you could see it when you watch a wrestling show. If you've ever been to one live, you see it in person, and there's just no real way to like stage that. It's
no,
just like the sound it makes at the particular wherever you hit, it just echoes, and they
oh,
have to really lay it in there.
yes, you have to, man, and it's really like the crowd plays into it, and really like if it's an enclosed area, that helps as well, I'm sure. But man, some of those chops, whew, just they just make you cringe, you know what I'm saying? Whew.
There's a lot of wrestlers who refuse to do the chops. It's funny you talked about Jericho. He was in a feud. He tells a story about him being in a feud with Ken Shamrock in the late '90s.
Oh,
And Shamrock was like, "Don't fucking chop me. I don't want to get chopped." And he's like, "Why? I chop everybody." He's like, "It looks fake to me. I don't want to do it."
wow,
So, but
wow.
of course, he just probably didn't like it.
Yeah,
So,
the thing is, I'm sure Ken was like, we all know he was probably juiced at that time, and so he was probably trying to prevent an incident where he got so angry that he got chopped. That's in my brain. That's probably where he was. but he probably just sounded like an asshole.
Well, so Jericho ended up chopping him, and then he says that Ken Shamrock folded him into like a little pretzel in the middle of the ring, and it was like, I told you not to do that to me. And he's like, okay, I won't anymore. So that's what happened with that.
Oh God, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, like Ken
Wild, man.
Shamrock was nuts. I wouldn't, mess with that
He
guy in his prime.
he was so strong, and I mean, he was the real. He could really fight, obviously, but yeah, no, he was a really good wrestler as well. He had
Yeah.
really fluid movement, and if the other wrestler could flow with him, then it could be a good dance.
I
Uh,
used to like when he would do the Hurricane Rana. Something about when he would do that was so fluid, and like his viciousness. He was basically like what Kurt Angle was. He was supposed to be that, but it
yeah,
just never came to. They never put the title on him. They never ran with it. I don't know if that was his personality, because I thought his personality was good, but for one reason or another, they just never hit the button with Ken Shamrock.
yeah, yeah. No, and it'll always be a mystery, why some wrestlers were superstars but kind of faded away or faded in and out, or obviously like Goldberg is one that I'll always think of. Yeah, he did come back, and he had some good years, I feel like, after his big stint. But when I look back and I look at WCW, like, I see all the characters, but there's no moment that hit me like it did when Goldberg was active in
Hmm.
WCW, and they couldn't ride it forever, right? We
Yeah.
saw the end of it. Like, you can't ride that something like that forever, but man, it was good for a long time. Um, I've never felt like someone was so unstoppable, like so like absolutely nobody could beat this guy. That was Goldberg for me when I was watching WCW, and but yeah, you know, it couldn't last forever. And I thought, looking back, I think it's pretty unique how they started to make him a more human and less superhero. Because initially it was like they had to cheat, right? It was Kevin Nash with the cattle prod. I think that was the
Yeah.
first
That's how it ended.
first official loss. And then he started to lose after that, and so that was kind of obviously the downfall of everything, in my opinion. Like,
Yeah.
once,
So back in the day, for those of you who don't know, Goldberg was unbeatable. Like when they debuted him, they didn't even like put much, like they were like, oh, here's this guy Bill Goldberg. Then he goes and he eats a finisher from some dude, gets up, destroys the dude in like 5 minutes. They try to get a word with him. He doesn't speak. He doesn't say anything. And then they just keep a tracker. Like they build it up so nice. They keep a tracker of him just killing all these guys in
who
like
is
five
this?
minutes.
Yep, yep, yep.
And then they start counting. Okay, he's 28-0. He's fucking 30-0, and
Climbing.
just every week it'll be like week 5 he'll be like 15-0, and then the next week he'll be like 29-0. Like, what happened to all those wins? How did they do that? They would
Yeah,
just add on numbers and it didn't make sense.
yeah, yeah. And in my brain, I was like, oh, he's doing the shows on TV, so he's getting extra wins. That's like, like that was what was in my head. But because at that time it was just so believable for me. Like, I was, a little kid. I'm just like, dang, this guy is so strong, and like he just absolutely obliterates everybody. It's not even close. Even these guys that are um like these huge personalities, WCW personalities that were already like fan fans love them. Basically, these fans are being transferred to Goldberg through these matches because he would one by one just dismantle everybody. And so, like, eventually at the end, it was like everybody was a Goldberg fan. Everybody's chanting Goldberg. And you get to that point, and it really is the top, and you can't stay there for very long.
It
But
was it,
I'm glad that I was around and that I enjoyed it because it was cool. It's definitely cool to watch.
it's like back, like, he would do things that no other wrestler would do. Like, people don't talk about his movesets too much, but he would like do these gorilla presses where he would have guys up for 5 seconds, and then he would just drop them, catch them, and then
Yeah.
just like
Yep.
slam them, and it was
Yep.
crazy because these
Yep.
guys were huge that he
Yep.
would do this to.
Huge. Yeah. And he would jackhammer people. And like you said, he would hold them up. Like,
Yeah.
obviously it's assisted. He's not doing it all himself, but it's still an absolutely amazing feat, like
Yeah.
for a man his size to be lifting men larger than him and to hold them in those positions, like that's superhuman and really cool. Really cool. Good man.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, yeah, they had to ruin it at the end. But it's like you said, they couldn't do that forever. At one point, he had to lose. I
Yeah.
don't know if it was like the right way. I think someone like probably should have beat him cleanly
Yeah.
because just having the NWO cheat, that was, I don't know, that just it didn't make sense at that point. I get it, you were trying to get a crowd reaction and everything, but really it kind of like soured everybody to the NWO to where they didn't even want to see them anymore almost.
Yeah. And I can't recall, but I do remember a few periods where it was like no one could win cleanly. It was like always something disrupting the match or
Yeah.
item that was used or a ref that was distracted. And so like for a long time you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't see like a clean match just finish. Like it was always something added in. But I feel like that's a phase that comes and goes as well. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in WCW, there was a lot of guys with these weird contracts who basically had creative control. So a
Uh,
lot of those guys didn't like to lose clean, like Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and people talk about this a lot, and I think people give them a little bit too much grief for this. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure that's what it was with some of those guys. It's just like they were probably thinking in my head, well, I'm a big star. It doesn't make sense for me to get beat like this. And,
right.
sometimes they're right, but sometimes you do have to lose
Right.
in a clean way to make the other guy believable. And that
Right.
way you sell more money. It's just basic business stuff. But at that time, I don't think anybody really took that stuff into consideration.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree, and that makes sense that you say that. And I do want to say that a wrestler that comes to mind for me that kind of normalized losing and making it okay and not being a heel was The Rock. I think The Rock lost way more than he ever won, at least when I was watching him, dude. But he would win. He would always win on the mic, right? Like he would never
Yeah.
lose the mic. So like you could always count on him talking that trash and like making the viewer feel a certain way. Like, oh, hell yeah, like the Rock's badass. You know what I'm saying? And then it would come to the match, and yeah, it might be like foul play or like illegal or whatever, but the Rock would lose. And so I think it was good to humanize a superstar, and it was kind of like cool to see, like he lost a lot, but then when he won it meant way more. You know what I'm saying? All the fans were like, dude, we've been waiting for this. Like The Rock doesn't win every week. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I
Yeah.
remember it was like, man, when's The Rock gonna, like, he's been losing a lot. He lost to Triple H, he lost to like all these people, and then
Yeah.
finally win. And it'd be like a really cool moment.
That's interesting. And see, you don't even remember that The Rock would lose. But now that I think about it, I'm like, yeah, there was a lot of big matches where he lost.
He lost. He lost a
But,
lot, dude.
but it was just so it was like so secondary because he was such a good performer and everything. Like you didn't even realize like, oh, this guy doesn't win that much, but he was just like
Yeah,
he got you invested in everything he did.
it didn't matter. Yeah, it didn't matter. It didn't matter if he won or lost. That was really like not the point. If you were watching him wrestle, it's because it was exciting, and it always was. It didn't matter who was in there with him. So
Damn, dude. Wow. There's a lot of things I guess that we as fans just don't remember or don't take for granted. Um, Talking about WCW again, so you had your cruiserweights and you had Goldberg. A lot of the big thing we talked about it a little bit. The NWO. Were you a big NWO guy, or were you just kind of like into your cruiserweights and Goldberg?
Um, yeah, I was actually not. Like I'm obviously I'm familiar with NWO. Like there was the OG, and then there was like the red version, and then there was like I remember all that stuff, but I couldn't tell you details. Uh,
Hmm.
I think that has to do like what we talked about earlier was at that time I was so into the wrestling, the actual wrestling part, that some of the story is like either fuzzy or like just didn't stick with me because it's just not what like captivated me at the time. Um, but goodness, yeah. I talked briefly about Conan in text with you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was
Really,
he was
really
a
cool character. Like I enjoyed his wrestling. I enjoyed his finisher. His setups were really cool. Like and if you can, did he had some like some partners or that he wrestled with? I can't recall.
he had so he was in the NWO for a little bit. Then he had I think he's the one. No, I don't know if he did. I think it was Eddie Guerrero, but there was a Latino World Order.
Okay, okay,
He
yeah.
he did some stuff with that, but
Oh,
he would have pretty big feuds. I remember he had a Ric Flair feud that was pretty well. He beat Ric Flair.
yeah, yeah. No, I remember them wrestling. I remember them wrestling for sure. Yeah, and their styles kind of really complemented each other. I
Yeah.
remember.
Ric Flair was not the big fan of Conan. He often talks a lot of shit. I don't know why, because Conan, what people don't know is back in his day in Mexico, he was the number one.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
he was the big star of the
yeah,
early days of the '90s in Mexico. So when they brought him over, it was like if there's any Hispanic fans watching, I'm sure like somebody will know who Santos is. Santos was the big Mexican wrestler in Mexico for a lot of years. That was basically what Conan was at that time in the
yeah.
'90s.
Just a superstar, right? Like
Yeah,
absolutely huge, and like obviously it had its own culture there, its own like blew up on its own there, had its own characters, and still does to this day. Um, but yeah, no, that's cool. Recalling, I remember Ming's finisher was so cool to me for some reason. And I think he was in the WWE for briefly as well, right?
yeah. He came right after. I think right before WCW closed down, he came in and he was Haku again.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, and it was so simple, right? But I think it was just when he landed it, like how he landed it, it would just be out of nowhere. And
It's because his hands are freaking huge. The finisher is called the Tongan Death Grip, and basically what it is he just like he puts this part right underneath your chin, and he
yeah,
just goes like this.
yeah, and shakes his head, dude, like his giant, uh,
Yeah, and he's
like
got like a big afro, so it's shaking.
yeah, it's shaking, dude, like all the power of the spirits just coming down through this death grip, dude, or something, man. And he would like he would do it through like a wood chair or like just like through something, and like grab someone through the ropes or like
Yeah, he's
oh, it
like a
was so
monster.
cool.
He's like Michael Myers.
Yes, yes, it had that vibe for real. Like you didn't know when it was coming, and it was just it was so simple that like you could counter it, but
Yeah.
when it landed, boom, done, dude. You're in the death grip, done, bro. Like
Ming was said to be the like most badass legit fighter out of the entire wrestling locker room. Many people have gone out on record to say that they see Ming beat up. Wrestling stories are a little crazy. They said like he beat up 10 guys in a bar and stuff like that.
yeah.
But looking at him, you could definitely see that this guy probably fucked somebody up.
Oh, for sure. No, I would believe any story about that guy for sure. Just seemed like a gentle giant,
Yeah.
but powerful and yeah, probably knew how to throw down. And so discredit that at all.
So, I guess we're winding down here a little bit. Just a couple last questions.
Sure.
What is a match that stands out to you as being one of your favorite? Maybe like 3 of them, if you can give me that.
Okay. One that initially just pops out into my head is actually it was like a Sunday Night Heat match. It was Booker T versus Val Venus, and it was at a stage where Booker he didn't have a huge fan base. He had just come in from WWE. He had finished his storyline, I think, and he was kind of stagnant. And Val had been out for a while, and so they came in and had a match. And like I said, Sunday Night Heat, real low key, right? But dude, this match was so good, and the crowd was captivated, dude. And so what happened was I was watching it live, and I could feel the crowd through the screen basically. And dude, they were putting on a show, and the finish was so good, man. It was so good. Booker is laying on the mat, right? And Val is going up for money shot. Booker does a spin-a-rooney out of he goes from basically knocked out to I'm back, kind of like Undertaker coming up, right?
Okay.
Whoa, what's going on? So he hops down off the turnbuckle, and Booker lands this so beautiful, I don't know what he called it at the time, but it's a Harlem sidekick,
Yeah,
from
that's what he called it.
WWE. And it was he was just gliding through the air, bro, flying. And as soon as he landed it, bro, Val sold it so well, and the crowd was just and I was ah. And so no one had yelled or cared about Booker until that match. And it was literally a Sunday Night Heat.
Wow.
It was not some pay-per-view. It was no storyline, nothing, dude. And they kicked ass in the ring. I remember it was a real technical match, and I'm pretty sure I've looked it up and I can't find it.
Wow.
Dude,
I'll have to try.
It's in here, bro. And it's literally something that I remember, and I still talk about. If anybody asks me about wrestling or one match, I'm like, bro, that's the one. Because after that, Booker literally went on, he rise to, be a personality in WWE and do stuff with Goldust and, be around for a long time.
That must have been early 2002 or maybe late 2001.
Yeah, so it was after the whole alliance thing, I think.
Okay.
Stone Cold and Booker and Kurt Angle and that whole group, and they had the big war, right? And I can't remember if it was right after that or what, but yeah.
Yeah, that timeline when they would fight each other and Booker was kind of on the downswing, that sounds like it would be either late 2001 or possibly early 2002. So I'll try to find that because I've never heard that before in all my ears.
Yeah,
That sounds sick,
dude. And it might be not as exciting as the story I told, but dude, in that moment, it was whoa, I felt him pull out of the slump, and it really was them both. Val basically sacrificed himself, in a match to create an exciting hero in just one win, and that's hard to do in wrestling, especially nowadays. You need a story, you need all this for people to care to watch the match, and for one match for two guys that were not a part of anything at that time,
yeah.
captivate a crowd like that, that was just so cool to me. So
Well, that was Val Venus. That was basically would have been his job at that point to get people over.
no, it was yeah,
because
and
that was way past his porn star thing and anything right to censor. He was long gone with that stuff by the time that match would have happened.
you are correct for sure. Yeah, and for him to do that, I think that's pretty cool, but I got to think of two more matches. Hold on. Let's see. Um, gosh, I'm picturing so much like Sting in my head and like
Yeah.
death drops and stuff like that.
Well, maybe just one more if you have it. If you don't, that's
Okay,
all right.
okay. I'm gonna say, and I don't know which one this was, but I talked about it earlier. But Kidman versus Rey Mysterio, dude.
Okay.
Um, but I know that they met multiple times.
Yeah, probably.
But dude, that's a match that I remember in my head as well as just being. It was so wild to see um, their styles mixed together, and I guess that's really wrestling, anyways. Is like every personality has specific moves that they do, and like, is it gonna look good when you wrestle this other person who has these different moves, and obviously you can always figure it out. You can mix in normal stuff, right? But when you're two exciting, high flying dudes and you're fast and you're furious, and yeah, it was. I just remember it being mind blowing. Like, how many counters, when you have a counter to a counter to a counter to a counter to a counter, that
Yeah.
then lands, then they're on the ropes dancing around. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, what is happening? That's so crazy. But yeah, I think those two matches: Kidman versus Rey Mysterio, and Booker T versus Val Venus.
Wow, that Booker T versus Val Venus, I've never heard that before. Ever. And I don't fault you because I have weird matches like that too that I like.
Yeah.
Like it was way later, obviously, but there was this Mark Henry and Wade Barrett match that I watched, and I thought it was great, but no one remembers it too. So there's a lot of stuff like that.
That's funny. I don't remember that, but I do remember a lot of Mark Henry. Big old dude, man, just a brick, and
Well, what made it good was like this was like because this is way past what we're talking about. This was like 2010. This was
yeah.
Wade Barrett had just formed the faction called the Nexus, and this was on Monday Night Raw.
Okay.
And this was to solidify him as a big main event player, so they put him with Mark Henry.
Yeah.
And the match was like so. You could do whatever. You can't really do too much with Mark Henry, but what made it great is they set up his finisher, and his finisher at the time is he would take you up in a Samoan drop and just lean you forward like that, and you would fall. And
Right.
it always looked shitty.
Yeah.
But for some reason, Mark Henry went to the top rope, which he's never done. But he went up there, and Wade Barrett is knocking him off. And
Yeah.
it's to set up to him to get on his shoulders.
Yeah.
And he takes him and he walks a little bit. And Mark Henry's like, it's like wobbling. And like he finally like forces him over. He's like, boom. And it was
Oh.
the biggest impact I ever seen. I was like, oh shit.
Like
I was a kid.
the whole mat goes down. Like,
Yeah, it was crazy. And he just went forward. And they were like, the commentators sold it so well. They're like, oh, I never seen Mark Henry get manhandled like that. And it was crazy. And that I always will remember that match as well.
dude, that's awesome. I need to watch that. Dude. That's awesome, though. Yeah. And anytime a big guy takes a fall like that, anytime Big Show gets slammed, anytime Mark Henry gets slammed, dude, like, it's like crazy to just watch. You like, that's so much human weight, coming down, and force, and they're doing it for the show, and they doing it because they love it, and obviously they make money doing it, but they're doing it because it's art and they're telling a story, you know what I'm saying, and it's entertainment, and yeah. So like we talked about earlier, it kind of sucks that there has to be a love hate with wrestling.
Yeah.
But I think maybe if people are listening in on this, maybe we can help break that stigma, and you can be a fan of fighting, real fighting,
Yeah.
and you can be a fan of wrestling entertainment. Like, there's no issues there. You know what I'm saying? Like, there literally isn't. It's okay, guys. You can be fans of both. There's entertainment in both. I guess that's
I'm clipping that and sending that to Island Strong.
There you go.
So thank you for coming on, man. That was a good first episode back. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's an honor. I look
Yeah.
forward to watching you with other people talking about wrestling. I'm definitely going to tune in, and I can't wait to be back on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely get you back on, man. All
Yeah.
right, so that's it for the Markout Podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and we'll see you next week.
Oh my God, are you kidding me?